What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing an incredibly unique and rare Pokemon for the Open Great League, Revavroom. Now Revavroom is a Poison and Steel type Pokemon, and the reason this Pokemon is so rare is because it's currently only obtainable through eggs, and if you hatch a Varoom at level 20, when it evolves it will unfortunately be above 1500 CP, so obviously no longer Great League eligible, which means like with any other Egg-locked Pokemon that does unfortunately get too high in CP at level 20, the only way to get this Pokemon for the Great League is to trade it from a super low level account. Now for anyone that doesn't know, when you are below level 20, the level a Pokemon will be when it hatches from an egg will be equal to the level that your account was when that egg was picked up. Now, as you can imagine, this thing absolutely walls most Charmers, but weirdly I only ran into a single Pokemon running Charm in a full day of battling, which is very strange. But not only that, I didn't see any toxic fast move beatdown teams today, which was very refreshing, but also a little bit awkward since my team actually does very well into those teams. But I think give it a day or two and Yonkers will upload another toxic team video, and those sort of teams will be out in full force once again very soon. So take advantage of it whilst you can, because I'm sure they will be returning. But anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. Which current egg-locked Pokemon do you wish would just be available to catch in the wild? I personally don't agree with any Pokemon being egg-locked, but if you could just choose one Pokemon to have in the wild to catch, let me know which Pokemon that would be. And with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Alright, so heading into the first battle leads Shadow for Alligator into a Charge Bug. Not a great lead, going to be swapping into my Galarian Weezing after going for one Shadow Claw, because that way I can still swap and transfer the damage from that Volt Switch to the Galarian Weezing. The opponent base with an X-Scissor, and that is double resisted by the Weezing. Definitely not the right play. We are full sending the Overheat. Unfortunately, the opponent does shield that up and eventually swaps into a Gligar. Now, of course, I can go for the Brutal Swings here, but unfortunately, since we have debuffed our attack, they're not looking particularly brutal here, as they can tank probably 4 Brutal Swings pretty comfortably. You can see, yeah, we have just barely got them into the yellow health range. At this point, I'm pretty happy that the opponent does throw the energy, and they also didn't overfarm a huge amount either. So this is just going to be an Aerial Ace. Shadow for Alligator is glassy, but we can tank this, and I'm definitely not going to be shielding that then when the opponent does have a Charge Bug in the back. So now we're going to farm up, throw on the CMP tie. Hydro Cannon does get the KO. They come back in with the Charge Bug. We're going for Hydro Cannon number 2, and then I will be swapping into my Revavroom, and the opponent is going to swap into a Scrafty. Now, this is not the most ideal matchup. We are a Poison type, and we are a Steel type, so taking neutral damage from those counters, and this opponent is actually running the Power Up Punch here. Of course, it does have access to Thunder Punch, but either way, Overheat gets the one shot. We've now double debuffed our attack once again, but it doesn't matter because we're already at Overheat number 2, taking out the Charge Bug, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to opponent there, and I also want to mention that I actually ran this team initially with my own Scrafty running Thunder Punch, but unfortunately it just didn't really work out with the backline that I was running, so I did replace it with Shadow for Alligator. Now again, swapping into our Weezing. This time the opponent doesn't bait, but they're going to swap out into a Lantern, and that's fine with me. We farm up to back-to-back Brutal Swings, and actually I have previously run Galarian Weezing with Hyper Beam, so I always farmed up to a potential Hyper Beam, or at least when I could, with my Galarian Weezing, hoping to maybe grab a shield. In this case, it doesn't work out for me. The opponent can just go for that Surf straight away, and they didn't have to commit a shield, but that's fine. I'm going to come in with the Revavroom, and I'm going to go and shield this up. I should be able to now just go for a full Poison Jab farm down, and we get a huge farm down. Now they're going to come in with a Shadow Gligar. I'm going to overfarm just a little bit, going straight for the Overheat. No baiting here. We grab a shield from the opponent. We swap back into Shadow for Alligator, but we now have an energy advantage. We can go straight for the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon will be grabbing the final shield from the opponent, and at this point, I'm just going to shield up my Shadow for Alligator. I realize that with a few more Shadow Claws, this is going to be Hydro Cannon range, and then all I need to do is basically force my opponent to throw the energy as soon as possible, and that's exactly what they do here. They don't even bother trying to overfarm. We can now come in with the Revavroom. I can overfarm just slightly. I'm not going to overfarm too much, going for the Overheat, and once again, Overheat gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to opponent there into next game, Shadow for Alligator into Annihilate, and Annihilate was one of the big reasons as to why I did scrap the Scrafty in the lead. I just found that it was a very difficult Pokemon to deal with. Of course, Galarian Weezing does fairly well, but Revavroom is going to have only resisted fast move damage there, so basically we need to land an Overheat, and of course, Scrafty doesn't do very well up against those counters. But the opponent's going to swap, but they make a catch onto Cresselia, which is fine with me, but they're actually running Confusion Cresselia, so that is very interesting. Still, Confusion's not the hardest hitting move on Cresselia since it is very bulky, and it can overfarm massively. Going for a third Brutal Swing, this will be threatening to grab a shield. If the opponent commits to a full farm down, I will make it to another Brutal Swing. So the opponent is forced to throw their energy when I am very low there, so I'm sure they weren't really keen on doing that, but they had to. But now we can just come in with the Shadow for Alligator, get a huge Shadow Claw farm down, and as well, I'm going to go for the Hydro Cannon straight away, taking out the Annihilate, and the opponent's got a Chandelure in the back. This is not a good matchup for us, but we barely hang on, living 3 Incinerates. We make it to a resisted Overheat, but it still takes out the Chandelure, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to the opponent there. Into next game, we're going to see a Shadow Victory Belt in the lead. I'm going to swap into my Galarian Weezing, and they are actually running the Magical Leaf as the fast move, so that's fine with me. They're also only going to farm to a Leaf Blade, so I'm definitely just going to no-shield that. And again, always farming to back-to-back Brutal Swings here. Going to go for the Brutal Swing. The opponent does no-shield, but that's fine. A second Brutal Swing would probably grab a shield at this point because it's very close to KOing. And at this point, the opponent is also not going to commit to a full fast move farm down, but they do throw just before we make it to the Brutal Swing, so that's fine with me. We're going to come in with the Shadow for Alligator, and I will admit I have not really played Shadow for Alligator since it did get buffed. I think I made one video where I used it in a triple crocodile theme team, or crocodilia theme team, since it is, I guess, an alligator, but there I did not expect to lose CMP, and what I didn't realize is there are a lot of Pokemon that is kind of just IV dependent. So for example, up against that Swampert, up against the Annihilate in the previous battle, but here we're looking to be in a decent position. But you can see these Dragon Breaths are seriously chunking. The Dragonite hangs on with 1 HP and a Dream, and that is actually a very good play from the opponent there, swapping out, forcing me to go for an Overheat, and now the opponent can just go for that Dragon Breath farm down, taking out my Revavroom. I still had 2 shields left, but they get the resisted fast move beat down there to take that game. So really nicely played by the opponent there. GG's, and into the next battle, we are going to see a Dragonair in the lead. So I'm going to swap into my Galarian Weezing. We get the one-shot with the Overheat, and finally, going straight for the nuke does actually pay off for us. But unfortunately, this is a bit of an awkward matchup here. You're going to see both Brutal Swing and Overheat are resisted, and we have double debuffed our attack as well. So we are really doing very little damage. They go for the Scald, but luckily for me, that just barely doesn't KO. So I can get off an Overheat. Yes, of course, it is resisted. It doesn't do much damage there, but also they don't get a huge counter farm down. Now at this point I realised they're probably not running Dynamic Punch. I can just go and let that move go through here. We can go for a Hydro Cannon, and then I will just swap into my Revavroom, and this should be a good matchup for us. Although we did just see we got fully farmed down by a Shadow Dragonite, so maybe it's not going to be as comfortable as it might seem, but we're going to go for an Acid Spray. We've still got 1 shield remaining. Acid Spray grabs that shield from the opponent, and at this point I possibly could live this, but there's no point taking any risks. Gonna shield up the Aqua Tail, and the opponent just concedes the match there. So GG's to opponent there. Into next game, we see Shadow for Alligator into a Goodra. So again, another Dragon in the lead. Gonna be swapping into my Galarian Weezing, and this time baiting out a Skarmory. So once again, I think I'm just gonna full send the Overheat. I really don't like baiting. Can we land it once again? And the answer is yes, we one-shot the Skarmory. And we flip switch advantage incredibly fast. The opponent's now going to come in with a Lantern, and this is a little bit awkward here because you can see these Sparks actually aren't doing that much damage, so they're going to get a huge farm down. These Brutal Swings, they are double debuffed. They are really not chunking up against the Lantern. What I was hoping was that I would be able to just go and swap out this matchup, bank some of the energy, but unfortunately I'm not able to do so. Now here, I think what I should have done there is prevent them from fully fast move farming me down, just come in with the Feraligatr and allow them to go for a Thunderbolt, expend their energy, but instead, because I allowed that full farm down, this Lantern is going to make it to 3 charge moves up against both the Feraligatr and the Revavroom. So I'm going to double shield here, assuming Surf, probably going to do more damage than a non-stab Aqua Tail or Thunder Punch coming from the Goodra, but unfortunately, we've seen already, Revavroom is not particularly bulky, so these Dragon Breaths are already chunking. They're going to make it to a charge move. Aqua Tail barely doesn't get the KO there. I can make it to a second Acid Spray, but honestly, they can actually just no-shield this. It would not KO, it wouldn't even get close, and they can just Dragon Breath, farm down the rest of my team, and unfortunately we do lose that game. But GG's to opponent there into next game. Shadow for Alligator once again losing the lead, but we are going to swap into our Galarian Weezing, and we're going to be met with a Bubble Mantine, which is very interesting. This time I actually didn't farm up to the potential Hyper Beam just because I wanted to try and throw it on good timing, and since this opponent is running Bubble, I mean, they could have been running Bubble Beam as well. I don't know, like, usually when you see an odd fast move from a Pokemon, then you probably should just maybe not assume that they're running the typical charge move set for that Pokemon as well. But either way, I'm just going to let the Weezing go down, and this is actually really nice for me because now we can come in with the Shadow for Alligator. I think they're only making it to one charge move, so I'm definitely just going to no shield, and the opponent is going to go for an Aerial Ace, doesn't do too much damage. We're going to get a huge Shadow Claw farm down, going to go for one extra Shadow Claw, go for the Hydro Cannon, and this is going to do big damage. This is a non-Shadow Magnezone, by the way, so I don't think it will quite KO, but I'm definitely just going to shield. They go for Mirror Shot, but they don't get the debuff, and that's absolutely huge for me. We can go for Hydro Cannon number 2. All shields are down. It doesn't quite get the KO, but we can get the Shadow Claw farm down, and at this point, we've got a shield advantage. We should be looking fine. I think I can live a Night Slash. I'm going to shield anyways, and we are going to go straight for the Overheat. Actually, never mind. We're going to overfarm slightly. This is the correct play, and Overheat will, of course, be once again one-shotting a Pokemon, taking out the Annihilate, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to opponent there. Into next game, we can see Altaria in the lead. So I've got two better Pokemon in the back. Well, I guess Galarian Weezing is a much better Pokemon. We've seen already Revavroom doesn't really handle dragons as well as you might think it would, especially up against Altaria. We just don't have a good charge move, and then the Poison Jab damage really isn't going to add up. So basically, I stay in with Feraligatr, bait like I'm running the potential Ice Beam, and then swap into my Weezing. And once again, you've seen it again. We're going straight for the back-to-back Brutal Swings there, baiting like we potentially could have a Hyper Beam. Again, the opponent is not going to respect the damage because I guess Hyper Beam isn't like a particularly common moveset on the Weezing, but I do like to go and build up to it anyways, just in case we do grab a shield there. But either way, going to come back in with the Shadow for Alligator. At this point, I'm going to shield up the Mud Bomb, and then I'm going to massively overfarm throwing on the CMP tie with this Whiscash. I don't expect them to shield here. We go for the Hydro Cannon, and they actually do end up shielding. So at this point, I think I'm also going to shield here. Shielding up the Mud Bomb, they are clearly weak to the Feraligatr, and they swap back into Altaria, and that was a mistake. You can see I swapped out of that matchup before I banked a Hydro Cannon, and we've seen it several times already. This Revavroom doesn't really handle the dragons that comfortably. We go for an Acid Spray here. I possibly could have just committed to a full farm down, but I think they were close to a second charge move as they didn't throw into the Feraligatr early in the matchup. We're now going to go for an Acid Spray. This should be a good matchup, but you've seen already with the Dragon Ref damage and a Sky Attack, they've put me into farm down range, and because we had double debuff their defense with an Acid Spray, I think they're in Hydro Cannon range. So if I just banked that Hydro Cannon before swapping out, I think we could have won that game, but unfortunately we do end up going down to an Ice Beam. So GG's to the opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see Whiscash in the lead. I'm going straight for the Hydro Cannon, a little bit risky as the opponent could make a fairly obvious catch, but they don't end up catching. Gonna let the first move go through here as they go for a Mud Bomb. They will outpace me to the next move, and once again we get starter lag. I basically mentioned this in every video, but unfortunately that means that I don't get the extra Shadow Claw through, which I should definitely be getting as the opponent can only throw an alignment up against another 2-turn fast move user. But anyways, I'm going to shield. I should still be able to win this in any even shield scenarios here, apart from the 0 shield scenario, I believe. But we take out the Whiscash. They're going to swap into Annihilate, and this is looking pretty good for us. We've seen already an Overheat from a Galarian Weezing should be enough damage to one-shot the Skarmory. And once again, yes, we have dropped our attack, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going straight for Overheat number 2. There's no point going for a Booster Swing here. It still does pretty big damage. They're going to have to go for a Shadow Ball. I think Night Slash wouldn't do enough damage, and of course counter is double resisted, but if they did overfarm, this could be slightly tricky for us. I can see my Switch Clock is coming up. The opponent makes it to a charge move though. Is this already the Shadow Ball? No, it's just a Night Slash. Panic over. We can go for the Overheat. I think Acid Spray, honestly, from this range might KO, but Overheat guarantees the job there, taking out the Annihilate, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to the opponent there. Into the next game, another Altaria in the lead. So I think I'm going to play this exactly the same as the previous one here. Farm up to a potential Ice Beam, and the opponent's actually going to swap into Lantern. Now, I don't have the best response to a Lantern, but also, since Spark did get nerfed, this isn't actually that bad of a matchup, to be honest. We're going for another Crunch here, and this one I'm happy to just sacrifice the Feraligatr. We get the Crunch debuff. Hopefully they don't have a Mud Boy in the back, because that's probably the worst case scenario here. But because we drop their defense, we can get a full Fairy Wind farm down, and they've actually got a Skarmory in the back. So we're going straight for the overheat once again. No baiting here, and now we're going to swap into the Revavroom. Now, they've only got resisted moves to throw on their final 2 remaining Pokemon, but Brave Bird is the hardest hitting move that they could potentially throw, so I'm definitely going to shield that up. Go straight for an Acid Spray here. Acid Spray not going to do that much damage, and once again, this Altaria did farm up a ton of energy before swapping out, so they go for a Sky Attack here. I think I possibly need to either commit to a full Fast Move farm down or throw my Charge Move sooner than that, because unfortunately now I am in range where the opponent can get a full Steel Wing farm down. But not only that, I didn't even make it to an Acid Spray. I think if I got to the Charge Move there, we possibly could have forced that final shield, but now I'm trying to make it to a Brutal Swing and an Overheat, but unfortunately just falling just short of that, and unfortunately they can just go for a full Steel Wing farm down, and I think I mentioned the word unfortunately about 10 times in about 20 seconds there, so apologies for that commentary, but GG's to that opponent, very well played. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Talonflame here swapping into our Galarian Weezing. I believe it was Credilli in the lead, so that's why we did swap out there, but once again, farming to a Hyper Beam there, and we actually grab a shield this time around, which is very nice. I'm thinking if they go for a Flame Charge, I might actually live this, and we do just barely hang on. I'm not going to risk going for the new mechanic there. I just go for one Fairy Wind, go straight for the Brutal Swing. It doesn't get the KO there, but it does put them into Shadow Claw farm down range. Since they did buff up their attack, I'm definitely just going to respect the damage here, and the opponent's actually going to go for a Flame Charge, which is quite interesting, but we get the Shadow Claw farm down anyways, and unfortunately again starter lag there, forcing me to throw on suboptimal timing, but luckily for me the opponent didn't throw a Charge Move there, and they're going to come in with a Pidgeot, so my Revavroom is actually core breaking their team here, but unfortunately Acid Spray not the best move to go for, and I don't really want to debuff my attack with the Overheat in case it does get shielded. Now I'm going to shield here knowing that a Brave Bird would do huge damage, and it's definitely the hardest hitting move that the opponent could possibly throw, but unfortunately they do bait with a Feather Dance, meaning this Charge Move isn't going to do much damage, but luckily for me the opponent does end up using their final shield. They end up going for a double resisted Grass Knot, which is very strange. I believe we should live a Rock Slide anyway, so it doesn't really matter there, but we go for the Overheat, taking out Credilli, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to opponent there. Into the next game, we see Shadow Feraligatr into Abomasnow. This actually isn't that bad for us. They're going to swap into Vigoroth, and since they did swap out using one turn, we're going to go straight for a Hydro Cannon here, grabbing a shield from the opponent, and then swapping into my Galarian Weezing, and we're also fortunate to get a Fairy Wind in for free with that swap. Unfortunately, we're still not going to be able to make it to an Overheat before they make it to Body Slam number 2, and whilst we could live this, it would get us very low, so I'm actually just going to shield that up, farm to nearly 100 energy, going straight for the Overheat once again, and Overheat does get the KO. I realise even if we debuff our attack by 2 stages, they can't really come back in with the Abomasnow here, so they come in with a Pelipper, and this time what I'm realizing is there's no point throwing straight away. I'm going to try and overfarm as much as I can, and then potentially if the opponent did commit to a full Wing Attack farm down, just swap back into my Feraligatr. But now we're actually going to come in with our Revavroom here, just because I realize they can't really go for a Hurricane here. Well, actually, never mind, they do go for the Hurricane, although they probably shouldn't have done so. But now we're just going to go for an Acid Spray. Acid Spray will put them into farm down range, but I think they were going to make it to a Weather Ball either way, so I swap into Feraligatr. Now they come back in with their Abomasnow, and things are looking pretty fine for me here. We're going straight for the Crunch, and Crunch is actually going to grab the final shield from the opponent, so that should be the game all wrapped up at this point. Weather Ball will be actually it doesn't quite take us out there, but it doesn't really matter. We are slightly behind on energy, but I will be able to outpace them to an Overheat before they make it to back-to-back Weather Balls, and of course I think from this range Acid Spray will probably get the KO. But we are going for the Overheat, hitting 0 bubbles, but of course it will still take out the Abomasnow, and I'm able to take that game. So GG to the opponent there. Into next game we see Shadow Gallade in the lead. So we're going to go for 4 Shadow Claws, swap into my Weezing, and I should resist the typical moveset unless they are running like Synchronize, which would be quite interesting and would have been very bad for the Weezing. But luckily for me, I think they are probably just running the standard moveset of Leaf Blade and Close Combat. We are going to go full send the Overheat once again, and this time it does get shielded. At this point, I possibly should have just let the Weezing go down, but we've got a second Overheat loaded. I'm going to full send it again, and this probably is a mistake. It was pretty obvious that I was just going to go for the nuke once again there. Now, unfortunately, we only make it to a Brutal Swing, but I realize I can probably catch them off guard here if I swap back into my Feraligatr and go straight for the Hydro Cannon, and that's exactly what we go for here. Taking out Sand Slash, we've still got a shield advantage, and they're going to come in with their own Feraligatr. Now, I don't really know why I went for the Hydro Cannon here. I was thinking that maybe I was in Hydro Cannon range, so I just wanted to guarantee that I get off a charge move. But you can see here, if I went for the Crunch, which the opponent also does up against my Feraligatr, I could just come in with my Revavroom and go for a full Poison Jab farm down. But you can see we're just narrowly short of missing out there. Does that even make sense as a sentence? I don't know. What am I talking about? And here, I thought they left with a Close Combat loaded, but I might have been wrong. Maybe they only left with a Leaf Blade. But either way, us swapping out there just guarantees the energy for a Close Combat. And since we are sub-steel as well as poison, that is neutral damage. It easily one-shots us, and we end up losing that game. So GG's to that opponent there. Into the next game, we see a Alolan Raichu. So, of course, going to swap into my Weezing, go for the Brutal Swing straight away, and they actually swap into a Victory Bell, which is quite interesting. This isn't a particularly good matchup for us. Once again, full sending the Overheat, and this does get shielded. At this point, I realized, actually, you know what? I kind of want to get a huge farm down with my Revavroom, so I don't even go for an Overheat here. That probably is a mistake because this is not a pure Grass-type Pokemon, so these Poison Jabs, whilst yes, they are hitting fairly hard, they're not hitting as hard as maybe as I thought they would, so unfortunately they make it to a Leaf Blade there. That is double resisted, but at this point I feel like I probably should start shielding here. So I'm going to shield up the next Leaf Blade, which I probably really didn't need to do there if I just went for a charge move on my Weezing. They're going to come in with a Dragonair, and this is where having only Acid Spray and Overheat is a bit of an annoying thing because, of course, Acid Spray does not do much damage up against a Dragonair or any dragon, and we've seen already we have struggled quite a lot up against dragon type Pokemon, which isn't ideal. But at this point we're just happy to let the opponent go for back-to-back charge moves. Body Slam gets the KO, we get the farm down, and I know they're running Volt Switch, so I'm actually not going to throw straight away just in case an Overheat doesn't get the KO. Instead, going for one extra Poison Jab, now going for the Overheat, and of course Overheat will be taken out of Alolan Raichu, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to the opponent there. Into next game, we see a Skarmory in the lead. So, of course, this is a pretty decent matchup for us. I'm going to go for the Hydro Cannon, but I will pause for one turn just to make sure they don't make a catch. Although, typically when I do pause, even if they do swap, I end up throwing anyway. So, that pause, whilst yes, it is a high-level strategy, I typically just don't react in time anyway, so it doesn't really matter in my case. But of course, there are a lot of battlers that have slightly faster reaction times than me there, where that pause would actually be very beneficial. But either way, they're going to swap into a Lickitung. Here, I possibly didn't need to farm to back-to-back Hydro Cannon. Instead, maybe trying to catch a Body Slam onto my Revavroom. But at this point, I realized there's no point swapping out. I don't want to switch lock myself. This could be very bad if the opponent is running a Mud Boy in the back, because of course we have seen Skarmory in the lead, but it's okay because they come back in with the Skarmory. So we're going straight for the Overheat here. Once again, not baiting, and we take them out there, and they've got a Carbink in the back, and I make a huge mistake here. I don't know why I swapped. Obviously, I was trying to clear the debuff to my attack, but we cannot hit for anything other than resisted charge move damage, so this is a massive mistake here. And then I'm going to make another mistake as well. At this point I was thinking I can probably reach back-to-back Overheat, so I'm going to go for the Overheat here, because even though it would be debuff, the second Overheat I believe would still hit harder than a Brutal Swing with no debuff. But unfortunately we just narrowly miss out, so basically everything I could possibly do wrong, I am doing wrong here. And you can see we've got them very low with just resisted damage, but if I went for an Acid Spray before I swapped out, I think we would have been in a very comfortable position. But here we are going to grab a shield there, and we get them very low, just not quite low enough though. So Rockside will get the KO, and unfortunately we do lose that game. But honestly, I can't really say unfortunate. We just played very badly there. But GG's to that opponent. Into the next game, we see a defense form to the Deoxys. I'm going to farm up to the Crunch and then just go for a Hydro Cannon. I know that they do roughly the same damage anyways, or at least the same DPE, so it doesn't really matter that we don't go for the Crunch there. By the time we make it to a second Hydro Cannon, I think we should just be able to get the KO anyways, but the opponent's actually going to swap, bank the energy, and come in with a Mana Buzz. So I'm once again going to bank a Hydro Cannon and then swap into my Galarian Weezing here, catching an Aerial Ace, which isn't going to do an awful lot of damage, and these Snarls are just really not doing much damage at all. So I'm going to no shield here. The opponent then goes for a Dark Pulse, which is very strange. I literally have no clue why they did that. It might do marginally more damage than an Aerial Ace, actually. I don't know. But unfortunately, the Overheat just barely doesn't KO either. But it doesn't really matter. We can just let this move go through, go for the Fairy Wind farm down, and they actually come in with a Clodsire. So I'm going straight for the Overheat here. Overheat is not going to do that much damage since we have already dropped our attack. And that, I guess, is probably the one thing that I wasn't too keen about Weezing, is that every time we went for an Overheat, of course, we suddenly just didn't do much damage at all. But either way, I realized here the opponent already has a charge move on their Deoxys. It's very likely that they're going to swap and try and get the snipe, and they do exactly that. So I'm able to swap there. They even went for an extra counter, but then they end up going for that Psycho Boost anyways. It doesn't really matter. Honestly, Psycho Boost probably will still KO here, and Psycho Boost actually doesn't quite get the KO. It doesn't really matter. We've now put them into range where we can just Shadow Claw farm them down, and we come out with a Hydro Cannon loaded. So this should be enough damage to get the KO here. But actually, no, it doesn't quite get the KO, but we are just barely able to get the Shadow Claw farm down. That was incredibly close, a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. Clodsire incredibly bulky there, but I am able to take that game. So GG's to the opponent there, and now into a few bonus battles when I was running Scrafty, and there is that one token charm user that I did mention in the intro. Unfortunately, aligned to my Scrafty at the moment, so not ideal. We bait out a Azumarill, and also we did once again, like I mentioned, farm up to a potential Hyper Beam, and that ends up grabbing a shield from the Azu, which is very nice because they are completely walling my charge moves here. So grabbing a shield is very good indeed. We can now go for an Overheat here, and Overheat not going to do that much damage. And at this point, I think I'm just going to fully sacrifice my Scrafty. It is absolutely useless up against the Grand Ball, so if they're running Play Rough, then so be it. Gonna no shield, but they actually go for an Ice Beam, so I don't know if that means they are running Hydro Pump as well and we're just baiting, or maybe they just baited for the sake of baiting. I don't have a clue, but either way, we swap into our Revavroom and they have a Melmetal in the back. So again, I am just full sending the Overheat, a bit hit and miss here, but Overheat does get the one shot, and now we've aligned it to the Shadow Gramble. Remember, we have just double debuffed our attack, but it doesn't matter. We can go for an Acid Spray, double debuff their defense, cancel that out, and we can go for the Poison Jab farm down, and I'm able to absolutely annihilate that Shadow Gramble to take that game. But speaking of annihilating, we see Annihilate in the lead, and this was also, I think, the only Bastiodon I saw in like 6 sets worth of battles, so kind of strange there, but I'm not going to complain. I really do not like seeing these toxic teams, but of course, just Bastiodon on its own isn't like super toxic. It's only really when it's paired with like a Charm user and a Razor Leaf user. But either way, we're going to go for the Overheat, dealing some decent damage, and I could make it to another charge move, but I realized actually it's probably better to get some farm with my Scrafty, so instead we don't throw the charge move. We're going to come back in with the Scrafty, and they will make it to a charge move, but that's fine. Scrafty is a pretty bulky fighting type Pokemon. Flamethrower doesn't do much damage. We're going to go for that Foul Play straight away, and then I will swap into my Revavroom. Unfortunately, they're also going to resist the Poison Jab damage, but there's really not a lot I can do up against Annihilate here, and this is one of the main reasons why I did swap out the Scrafty for Alligator, but they come in with a Wall Rain. Now this is an interesting matchup. I'm hoping to grab a shield with the Acid Spray here, but the opponent no shields. They call the bait, and they can just barely outpace me to the charge move. I'm going to shield. They go for an Icicle Spear, bait of their own, and at this point, Icicle Spear is going to get me very low anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to try to come out with 2 Acid Sprays loaded, but unfortunately, we are just narrowly short of that, so we are going to go for the Acid Spray, but this is game over. The opponent can just commit to a full counter farm down, and they can just counter farm down my Revavroom too, but they're going to throw a charge move just to play it safe. Shadow Ball gets the KO, and unfortunately we do lose that game. So GG's to the opponent there. Internet's going to see Dugong in the lead, so a very good lead matchup for the Scrafty. I'm hoping with Thunder Punch we can just land 1 Thunder Punch and then commit to a full counter farm down, but Scrafty is fairly bulky here, and of course they're going to go for an Icy Wind, so they're going to drop my attack, so maybe that won't quite be possible, but they're going to swap into Lantern anyway, so I'm going to bank a Foul Play, then swap into my Galarian Weezing. I'm basically just going to fully sacrifice it at this point. I don't think I'm going to commit any shields in this matchup. I don't think I have a reason to, and again, we are going to farm 2 back-to-back Brutal Swings or a potential Hyper Beam, and we end up grabbing a shield there because we did overfarm so massively. You see, we're getting a little bit of like frame drops there, but we don't miss out on hitting an excellent, and at this point I'm just going to let the Weezing go down. Surf will be taking us out. We can come in with either Pokemon. I think I will come in with the Revavroom. Actually, nope, never mind. Ignore me. I'm going to come in with the Scrafty, and I'm actually not going to shield this, which is very risky. We don't know what's in the back there. I'm going to go straight for the foul play. Hopefully, we can beat whatever's in the back with our Revavroom. We're going to swap into it now as the opponent comes back in with the Dugong. This is very likely to be an Icy Wind bait, but I have to shield it just in case it is the Drill Run, and they've got a Trevenant in the back, so they've already dropped my attack. I'm just going straight for the overheat. We've seen it many times. I don't like baiting, and in this case, it does pay off as the opponent no shields it. We get the Poison Jab farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to the opponent into the final battle of this video, and another reason why I did eventually swap for Shadow for Alligator. My team was just very weak to fire type Pokemon, and especially Talonflame. I just really didn't have much options here. You can go for a Thunder Punch, they're just going to shield that of course, and now they can go for a Fly. This is going to grab my shield. We can just barely outpace them to the next charge move since they did throw on alignment here, but Thunder Punch is probably going to be double shielded, and Talonflame users, especially when you have like a fairly neutral matchup or slightly negative matchup, love to double shield in the lead matchup there. And it just gets out of hand at some point because now they can go for Flame Charge. Flame Charge is going to ramp up their attack. They make it to another charge move. I'm just going to no shield. I can't really afford to shield this up here, but they're still not really in range for me to counter down with my Scrafty before they make it to yet another charge move. And at this point, we've just got to hope that Revavroom can beat whatever's in the back. We need to 2v1, and they've got a Shadow Swampert anyway, so very, very clear loss there. So I'm just going to back out and concede that match. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you want to take your support even further, you can now become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has already become a channel member. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.